click that next button. Don't even think about clicking on a different podcast, because That is Effin' Weird is here to bring you a wealth of knowledge today.
All right, welcome back to That is Effin' Weird. On today's episode, Clark is going to be telling us a story today. I have no context of what it is. I'm very excited. Whenever Clark tells us a story, or whenever he's the one hosting the episodes, I feel like I'm in like a college course learning anything and everything about history. Clark, you're a smart dude. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm Stevenson Longbottom, and Clark, what are we going to be talking about today?
So this is one that we've kind of not really teased specifically, but we've thrown around personal stories. Since I had told on the Lavinia Fisher episode some of my ghost experience from Charleston, I figured I would do one that's really hits close to home. This is probably my most personal ghost story, and I've never told it on the podcast before, but this is my 100% true, or as true as it can be believed, personal ghost story. And this isn't just like a third party. I'm doing a tour, or I'm with people, or could have seen something. This is I've witnessed and had verifiable witnesses along with me several experiences in a haunted house, or potentially haunted house. So this is probably my most personal ghost story, and I figured it's perfect for the Halloween season.
Well, I was going to say too, like, I think you've mentioned this on a couple of the other episodes, is that you used to give ghost tours, correct?
Yeah, it was walking tours, yeah.
Okay.
So this has nothing to do with any of that. This is actually from my hometown that I grew up in, actually the house that I grew up in. So it will have nothing to do with Charleston or any of those like famous ghost stories or anything like that. This is an undocumented ghost entity thing that I grew up around. And anyone who listens to the show in the past, I should preface, if you don't know this, I am probably the most skeptical host on the show, I would think. I don't know. Let the listeners decide that from the past, but I'm usually the party pooper, the guy bringing the facts. That's why we have Clark Ruins History as an ongoing segment now.
To caveat on that, I think it's some things. Yes, you're very grounded in reality and facts and logic and everything, but I do feel like there's been times where you've swung the other way, because I will say, I feel like when it comes to ghost stuff, I feel like people draw the line right there. And again, I don't understand how people don't believe in ghosts, or the spirit realm for that matter. I don't know if it's one and the same, because there's so many videos. And again, I know we talk about this all the time. It's very easy to fake videos, especially with AI. But I do feel like there are some genuine footage out there that I just don't know how you can say that ghosts or the spirit realm does not exist.
Yeah, it is very easy to be fooled, not only by technology and not understanding technology, by videos, or even like if you're the one taking the video, but it's also very easy to be swayed by your own mind and the human brain, just because it is conditioned to be on alert and to have anxiety. So seeing things, hearing things is actually something natural. Basically, as an evolutionary protection, if you think about it, your body is safer assuming something is dangerous or coming after you than to not. So that's why we advance as a species, is if you see a shadow, your brain naturally wants to make a face or put a body to it.
What is that called? There's like an official term for that.
It's obviously not anthropomorphism. That's when you're putting a human sentiment to an animal or something, but it's something along those lines. I can't think of what it is right now, but yeah, when basically your brain wants to see shapes, and it wants to make sense of things that don't make sense.
Yes.
And specifically shadows, or things you see in the dark. You will see shadow people or things like that. And especially people that have like night terrors. That's obviously a very common symptom of night terrors, is you see shadow people. And it's usually just actual things that are happening to your body physiologically, like the shortness of breath, stuff like that. That's why they say the feeling of someone sitting on your chest is where obviously we get succubus and incubus demons that come in the middle of the night. That was probably night terrors, and that's where we get the story of incubus and succubus, or even the boo hag that we had mentioned, I believe, when we were talking about the Lavinia Fisher episode. That's a popular Gullah haunt from like the Low Country.
Oh yeah,
Very similar, where it's like a witch kind of character as opposed to a demon that comes in and would sit on your chest, cause you to be short of breath. And also it was an explanation for things like SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome and things like that. So it's easy to put a supernatural twist on something that can be explained physiologically.
So quick side thought, or like I want to get your opinion on this. So I do know that like with alien abductions too, it's kind of the same thing where people like report a force or an energy upon them, and then also seeing like creatures or things in a room. Do you think this is all explained through night terrors, or like something is just happening with your body and like this is not necessarily true, it's not happening? Or do you feel like that there is this supernatural, could be aliens, could be the spirit realm? I guess, what do you lean more towards? Again, I know you said you're the skeptic, but could it be, or do you believe that it's one of the three, or do you think it's just, it can all be explained? What do you think?
I think alien abduction, ghost sightings, and near-death experiences. I would say I lean somewhere in the realm of 90%. I believe that it is physiologically explainable, that it is something that's just happening, a natural phenomenon between your brain, neurons firing into nothing, basically, kind of situation. Or in the case of near-death experiences, it could be literally the brain flooding the body with endorphins, chemicals, dopamine, different things that are meant to push pain aside and give you like that kind of the feel-good feeling chemicals or whatever, so that your body is ignoring the fact that it is shutting down. Because I lean very much towards all of these supernatural events being practically explainable. But I do leave the door open for that like 10% where I want something, and this is the best segue into me telling a story like this too, where I say it's a ghost story, is I do want people to know that I'm very hard to shake, or I'm not fast to rush in and believe immediately that it is something paranormal. I have to have a lot of experience or thought, like reflection, before I will admit, well, I guess that's unexplainable. I won't say definitively I know what it is, because if I can't prove what it is scientifically, then I'm probably going to say it's just unexplainable. I'm not going to chalk it up to, oh, this is definitely a ghost, or this is a demon, or this is a alien. I'm probably just going to land on, I'm probably not going to understand what it is. And if it is something beyond this realm, then there's a reason I probably don't understand it. It's past us already, whether it be spiritually or technologically advanced. It's something we don't get.
Well, okay, so one last thing. When you were saying like the near-death experiences with like the endorphins firing and just like dumping a lot of dopamine and everything like that, have you heard of the third-party syndrome?
No.
So I've seen a couple of articles on this, and apparently like a lot of mountain climbers or people that are like almost at their breaking point, they envision or see somebody or something there telling them to continue on and like push forward. So like part of me thinks that it's the body's last kick effort of just dumping everything that it has left, like pushing the body and pushing the person to just go that much further. So they might be hallucinating in some sort of way. I mean, I don't know, maybe not. To me, that kind of maybe explains the third party syndrome, where it's explainable, but so many people around the world experience this, whether it be mountain climbers or people that are, stuck in a car or like just in a very bad situation. They experience this same thing. So I don't know why I was thinking about that, but you just saying like the whole dopamine, your body just dumping a lot of it and it's explainable. I think I saw the post recently, so that's why I was thinking about that. But I'm rambling. I think we should get into your story. I'm excited to hear it. What do you have?
All right, and these are always good for the outtakes anyway. So we always end up on these random tangents, but that's great. And this that could also easily bleed into the philosophical discussion of consciousness itself and how much of it is like how much of your reality is actually your own projection.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that if you really want to keep yourself up at night, like and drive yourself crazy, yeah, just think about the next time you're talking to anyone and put yourself in the experience of their entire reality is different from your entire reality.
Oh,
To the point of, can you even believe that they're a real person, or are they just a projection of something that you have created?
Now I feel like we're going to start talking about the Matrix now.
Yeah, is brain in a jar theory.
Hey guys, Future Haunted here, just cutting in real quick to tell you all about our new friends over at the Subculture podcast. Let's see what they have in store for us.
In this modern world of fractured societies and niche content, dwells an ever-present underbelly that only the few know how to find. Two intrepid voyagers delve into its depths to bring you the inside scoop. This is the Subculture podcast. Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Joe, and we invite you to join us on a journey of discovery on the Subculture podcast.
That's right. Each episode will dig around in a subculture, hidden hobby, or perplexing pastime, and then tell you all about it.
We'll try to find the good, the bad, the outright weird, the sexual, and the why. Why do people do it?
Wait a minute, did you just say sexual?
I did. Comes up more often than you'd think, or like.
Oh boy, nothing stranger than other people, am I right?
You're right. From ASMR to Zodiac believers, it's all going under the microscope.
So head on over to your favorite place for podcasts and search for us by name, the Subculture Podcast. We're on them all. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. I've even trained 10,000 screaming howler monkeys to yell it into people's windows at night.
Oh, not this again, Andrew. We've talked about the monkeys before.
Again, that was our friends over at the Subculture podcast. If any of that piqued your interest, then you should absolutely give them a follow. I know I already have. And now, back to the episode.
All right, let's get to the story though. So back to the paranormal. Let's enjoy the spooky season with this one. So special glimpse into Clark, aka the Reverend Michael Snakebites, past. So this story starts many years ago, I guess. It was the house I grew up in, and I grew up in a city called Augusta, Georgia. Golf fans will probably know it as the place where the Masters golf tournament's held. It is the most prestigious golf tournament, but really one of the most prestigious sporting events in the world. So it's known for that, but it's also one of the oldest cities, not only in the South, but in America. It has the South's oldest newspaper, which dates back to right at the end of the Revolutionary War. I think the newspaper goes back to 1783. So
Wow.
that's literally as the peace is being signed between Great Britain or the UK. I don't even know at that point if it's just Great Britain or the UK. I don't know how solidified they were in as terminology.
Yeah.
But between Britain and the United States, what was now becoming the United States. So it's a very old city. It did have a lot of history as far as participation in the American Revolution. Before that, it was just a trading post, and the city eventually grew and built up. But it also has a lot of Civil War history to it. It did avoid being burned by Sherman during the march through Georgia. There's a whole urban legend about that Sherman, he was stationed actually in Augusta pre-war, and there's rumors that he just liked the city and he didn't want to burn it down. That's why he bypassed it and went around it. Some people say he bypassed it because it just wasn't worth it. It was easier to just go around it and go straight to Columbia, South Carolina and kind of starve it out than it was to actually waste men on trying to attack it. And then there's the most popular version was that Sherman had a girlfriend in Augusta. Very popular urban legend. So, it's got a lot of history. Obviously, it's a very old city. And my house that I grew up in actually was along a tributary of Rays Creek, which is it's only famous if you know the golf tournament, the Masters. Rays Creek is a very picturesque creek that runs through the city, and you almost would think it's a river, but it's technically not a tributary of the Savannah River. It cuts through the golf course, and it makes for just a really picturesque view. Well, this is a tributary that ran off at my house I grew up in. So I had this nice creek, this big yard I was playing. It was a nice little house, but I got to paint a picture so you can kind of understand where it is.
You're doing a good job at it. Keep going.
So the house itself was a tri-level house. So if you were to walk in our front door, you're actually on like the middle level. So you could walk in our front door and turn right, and you would go downstairs into a den kind of entertainment room. If you were to go straight, you would see like a dining room, the kitchen, things like that. And then there were stairs that would go to the right, also upstairs. So you go downstairs or you go upstairs when you came in to the house. So it's tri-level. Now in that den downstairs, there was an offshoot room that I always just called the back room. That's always just what we called it. This is where I had like my Nintendo set up and things like that. It was kind of like a playroom. It's where all my like toys were kept and things. And it was a laundry room. So there's like a laundry room back there. There was a TV set up with like my Nintendo, kind of where you just shove the kids away and be like, go play. So it also had a door that led out into our backyard. There's nothing really ominous about this room in particular, except for the fact that at nighttime when it was dark, it was always a very creepy, heavy feeling room. It was always darker than the rest of the house is the easiest way to describe it. You could see this room down a very short hallway between the den, which was kind of like I said, the main entertainment room for people to gather and watch TV. And then there's like a little bathroom, and then there's the back room. So if you're at night sitting on the couch watching TV, you can look down that hallway and just see the dark back room. And it's very dark. And like I said, it always just had a weird kind of overbearing feeling. It was just, like I said, darker than the rest of the house, a weird energy kind of feeling.
Hold on 1 second. I just want to interject right here because what you're describing, I feel like I grew up in almost the exact same thing. Because we had a 3-level house where I first grew up when I was just like a little kid, and almost like the same thing that you're describing. Now there were windows that like projected light in, but almost like that dark hallway. I don't know, like why do they set them up like that? Now I get it. It's like it's a house. It's just the design, whatever. But that is such a creepy design, and I feel like what you're describing right now, a lot of people can resonate with that because exactly what you're saying, I feel like I had this exact same thing where like our downstairs was like a living room area, but we had an offshoot hallway. Like you'd be in your basement watching TV and that hallway would just be dark, and there was 2 rooms, that one that you could go right, one go left. As a kid, it was very creepy. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, again, I didn't grow up in a haunted house or anything like that, but I think what you're saying, a lot of people can resonate with.
Yeah, that's another thing I want to specify is the house itself was built in the 70s, I believe, or it would have been the early 70s, late 60s. I know my parents moved into it in 1972.
Okay.
So the house itself as a structure was not old. The land it was on, it had a lot of history of, armies marching over it during Civil War, during the American Revolution. Obviously, before that, it was American Indian ground. Mm-hmm. I don't know any specific history that would have caused any kind of stereotypical paranormal energy. There was one owner before my parents, so there's nothing as far as like a long history to it. It's not like an old antebellum house or something. Yeah. Just a neighborhood that was built in a particularly old city.
Yeah.
So yeah, now that we have like kind of setup of where this room in particular was, it kind of will give you why I think it was creepy, because later on I find out that more people had this experience and I just kind of kept it to myself. I thought it was, in retrospect of just me being a kid. All kids have that thing. It's like in Home Alone where he's like afraid of the furnace.
Yes.
That's how it was to me. That room at night when it was dark was just creepy. It just gave me like the willies, and I just never really liked it. It would always kind of make me want to it's like, okay, it's probably time to wrap it up and go upstairs. So that's just the feeling I get. Let's fast forward now to when I'm a little bit older. We'll say I'm now like probably in my early teens, I would say, probably middle school aged.
Okay.
And this is when I start, I guess, noticing stuff. And so I lived with my grandmother, my mother and father, and my older sister. There's 5 people in the house at any given time. The upstairs has one long hallway with 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. So there's the master bedroom, a bedroom that's kind of like right in the middle of the hallway, and that is my bedroom. And then my sister's is next to me, and then my grandmother's is at the end of the hallway. So kind of in a U shape. No doors are facing towards each other. They're all facing towards like the stairs going downstairs. You can't see into anyone else's bedroom, put it that way. The only way you would see a person is if they walk by that hallway to go towards the bathroom or to go to another bedroom or downstairs.
Okay.
Semi-private, I guess. As your door is open, you're going to see people walk by.
Mm-hmm.
I would sit in my bedroom sometimes and I would see like my grandmother walk by and I wouldn't think anything of it because, like I said, doors open, there's a hallway, people are moving. Every now and then I would catch weird things where she would walk by and then like I wouldn't see her walk back. So I'd be like, where did she go? And I would go check on her, make sure nothing was wrong. And I would get up and the bathroom door is open, lights are off. No one else is home at the time. People are working or in school or something like that. So I'm looking around and she would be in a completely different part of the house. She would be like downstairs or in the kitchen.
Creepy.
And my bedroom being the one that faces the stairs, like people cannot come up or down the stairs without me seeing them
Yeah.
with my door open. So, and I probably should like take some pictures because my parents still own this house. So I should like go take pictures and show some of these angles so you can see that you can like it is impossible to sneak around this house. Put it that way.
Okay.
Like people are going to see you, and you can't really like ninja your way through through this house, or like unless you're crawling on the ceiling or something. So like little weird things like that, and I just would kind of ignore them. Well, all the way through high school, I started to like catalog some of these things, but I never mentioned it to any of my parents until one day in particular. It really struck me. My mother gone to get groceries. I think this was like on a Saturday, or it was during the summer or something, because I wasn't in school. My dad was at work. My grandmother was in her bedroom, and I'm sitting at like my computer, and my mom she's particularly loud. That's the only way to really describe it. I hate to say it like that, but she would, and impatient. So when she would come home with groceries, she always expected me to be like at the door waiting to help her get stuff. It was one of those things where I wanted to like, I didn't want to hear like, come on, help. I wanted to be like ready to go. So I'm sitting at my computer and I'm kind of paying attention, and I hear our garage door open that comes to the side door. Now, the kitchen, you can see from my room down the stairs. I have a straight line of view shot to that back door that she is going to come in. And I'm sitting at my computer looking at my screen. I hear the garage door opening and I'm like, oh, I need to go help get groceries in. So I'm about to like close all the windows or whatever and like get up and go. And then I hear the back door open. And as soon as the back door opens, I hear some bags rustling and I hear something along the lines of like, I'm here, or like I'm home. And I yelled back audibly, all right, I'm coming. And I stood up, kind of took a skip step down the stairs, and I bounced down and I hit the kitchen and the door shut. I'm like, that's weird. And I walk and I look through the window of the back door and the garage door is shut. So I very clearly heard the garage door motor running. I heard the back door open and I heard my mother's voice call me. In the 2 seconds it took me literally to turn, walk down the stairs, everything was as it was.
I can't tell you. I think Haunted, our editor, he had mentioned some Reddit posts, and I think one of them was about how it was like a cell phone call from a loved one and everything like that, and like the voice was the same, and it was like clearly the person who that person had lost, yada yada. It doesn't matter. What I'm getting at is that this is exactly why I don't understand why people don't believe in the spirit world or like believe in ghosts, is because you clearly heard your mom's voice and you clearly heard the garage door or like a door opening. They know what they heard. And it's to me, it's so crazy to believe there's a spirit world. It's hard for us to understand. I just find it so amazing that it can mimic sounds like perfectly to the T. And I do know that like sometimes it's perfectly explainable, like where you think you heard something and it wasn't. What is it called? Not EMPs, EFPs, electronic voice, EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, where like people will get recordings of like, the spirit world of these things saying something and it sounds like a human. So like that piece right there just kind of gave me some chills. You know what you heard. You know your mom's voice. You heard it a million times. To go down there and she's not there. I can only imagine what you were feeling at the time when that happened.
Confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one thing to just think you hear someone call your name. Once again, we always say you can hear stuff that your brain kind of fills in the gaps. Like you hear
Yes.
something that kind of sounds like your name and you think someone called your name. But this was like enough to where I jumped up out of my seat, ran down the stairs, and everything is as it was, lights off, doors shut. And I was very, very, very confused. But this is when I really started to take notice of like, okay, now I need to start paying attention to some of these things because this is weird and I need to maybe mention it to someone. So
Before we move on, do you believe that can happen as well? Do you feel like the spirit world, or do you feel like that there is some stuff that can like mimic sounds like what you heard? Or are you still chalking it up as there is an explanation as to what you heard?
with this one, it's definitely, I've kind of just come to the conclusion that I won't understand what it was.
Okay.
I don't think I will get a satisfactory answer. And once again, the reason I do this podcast, I should remind people, is because I'm open. I'm the skeptic, but at the same time, I'm fascinated by lore, legends, cryptids, all of this stuff. So I'm open to listening to people's stories and wanting to talk about it, skinwalkers, being able to mimic voices, or demon, trying to fool you. Is it just a ghost, or is it some other kind of weird poltergeist thing? Like, that's what we'll get into, I guess, is talking about, because I call this the mimic. But when you say, oh, I had a mimic in my house, some people want to chalk it up to something like that. They want to say, oh, that's a cryptid. It's an animal. It's actually something tangible you can interact with. And some people say, oh, it's demonic. You don't want that in your house. It's an evil spirit.
Yeah.
You get so many different answers of what it could be, and like I said, I'm just going to say I don't know what it was, but I can tell you my experience 100% happened to me, and as I'm about to get into, it happened to other members of my family.
Well, let's hear it.
All right, so after this, like I said, I started paying attention to a lot of this when people would walk by, and it wasn't like this was an everyday thing, but it happened often enough over time. Like, I would say from the years of me being like 13 to 18, basically before I graduated high school and went off to college, I would start paying attention to these things a lot. I was like, this is just happening way too often, where people walk by the door and then never walk back by the doorway. So you wonder what happened to them, and you realize they never left their room to begin with, or that the person wasn't even in the house to begin with. That's when it started to get weird. One time I saw my sister walk by the doorway, and my sister's 3 years older than me. At this time I was 17 or 18. I was a junior or senior in high school. She walked by the doorway. I saw her, and I wondered what she was doing home, because she should have been 174 miles away at college.
That's crazy.
So that's when you bring it up to other people's attention. You say, I started asking my mom, and she's like, I've seen the same thing. Like, people walk by and I could have sworn it was you, and it wasn't. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Now people are seeing me. It's one thing when you're seeing people and you're like, okay, that's weird, that's crazy. Am I seeing things? But then it's weird when someone accuses you of being the person.
Yeah.
Puts it on its head there a little when they're like, no, this thing looked like you. And it's like, oh shit. So
That's just so weird that it's like it was able to like take the appearances of your family members and walk around the house. That's wild.
And it happened often enough to where eventually we all started talking, and we all had similar experiences. My mom, my dad, my grandmother, and my sister, we all had similar experiences of, oh yeah, we definitely saw such and such walk by, or such and such called my name to come into the room, and they weren't in there when I walked in there, or they weren't even at the house. They were somewhere else. They were at work or something. And we all just kept it to ourselves until like I brought it to their attention and was like, hey, is anybody else seeing this? And then everyone was like, yeah, actually. And then we all started being like, okay, this is mutually weird now. And, we never really considered the options, because my family's not as into, my dad's very much into history. That's where I get it from. My sister could care less about stuff like that. She watches trash TV and like pop culture stuff. She's not into like anything like urban legends or ghosts or anything like that.
Yeah.
My mom the same. They're very much similar. So, you got to take all these different viewpoints too. Like, we're all kind of skeptical in our own way. And then when you bring like religion into it, well, yeah, we were all raised in the church, went to church together and things like that, but we weren't a very like open religious family. Like, we weren't, saying the blessing at dinner kind of thing, or like we didn't have like family Bible time or something.
Yeah.
So we never really discussed of what it could be. We all just kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, something's here. That's kind of weird. And my dad is from, Appalachia, so he kind of has this belief in haunts and weird creatures and stuff like that already anyway. So his whole mentality is, yep, that's weird. Probably should leave it alone. And that leads me into the next thing, though, is we never really found out what it wanted. It never caused problems. It was always mischievous. We never found out why would it want us to go into these rooms. It's not like it was for anything nefarious, because nothing bad happened to any of us. It was almost like it was just playing with us, like just toying, like, oh, we wanted to just weird you out or make you think you're crazy.
That was my next question. Was it doing things that were making you feel threatened or in danger in any sort of way? But then also, when you guys were talking about it, did the activity increase, or was it just like, no, we could talk about it, things wouldn't happen, and then just, randomly something would happen again?
It just kind of stayed at the same frequency and pace. Like it just, things happen. It's literally like the line from Ghostbusters. Weird stuff happens, and who are you going to call? Like, it was just unexplainable. Things would occur, and once we all spoke about it to each other, it just became a common thing to be like, oh yeah, that happened again, or saw this happen again. Then it just became more of like a running joke, and oh yeah, that's what happened the other day. And it became just more interesting coffee talk. And still to this day, I guess, I should probably ask them, since I'll see them tomorrow, if they've had anything weird happen recently.
I mean, that's a good feeling in a sort of way, like, especially like as a kid growing up in this house. As a kid, it can make you feel uncomfortable, a little uneasy. I'm glad that nothing was like, glasses weren't being like thrown across the room, or, waking up with like hand marks on you or anything like that. So it's really nice to know that there was nothing bad going on. And I feel like there are those instances where like people have some sort of spirit in their house and it's nothing bad, or the spirit isn't doing anything bad. It's just like, hey, you're living essentially in another space with this thing, and they just sometimes will make an appearance, or they might say something. I don't think I would like living in that environment, because then I think I'd start getting paranoid. Especially like at night. I think that's where I draw the line, where it's like things at night, I just, no, like I can't deal with that.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like there was never any like physical interaction. Once again, like you said, no poltergeist stuff. No, things weren't getting moved. Things weren't missing. It wasn't like the classic like cabinet doors opening or anything like that. It was always just a visual entity drawing your attention, or an audible entity drawing your attention somewhere, almost like playing practical jokes. Once again, things never went missing or anything like that. I never noticed things being moved or just out of place. It was always just visual or audible. It just continued. I can tell like a million instances of seeing things. One of the weirder ones also that happened that kind of freaked me out was my grandmother. She lived to be 98, and like I said, she was living in the house, and when she got older, she got more and more unable to move around as well. Obviously, you're 98, you're not moving like you used to. And so I would bring her lunch and things like that just to make life easy. And my dad would sometimes give her lunch. Now, my dad and I look very similar. He's in his 70s now, so obviously he's a much older version of me, but we both look very similar, especially when you look at younger photos of him. We looked identical. We thought maybe she was starting to have some dementia, because I would bring her lunch sometimes, and she said, where's the other guy? Like, I would bring her lunch and she said, what happened to the other guy? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, the other guy that brought me lunch. And I'm like, are you talking about my dad? And she was like, no, I know him. And she would say his name and everything. And I'm like, okay, well, you definitely know the difference. And she's like, are you talking about Clark? And she was like, yeah, I'm Clark. And like, it started to get real strange, where she would claim she would see two of me, things like that. And it was just starting to get real strange. And I'm like, well, I know my haircut's changed a lot, but that's kind of weird. It just started getting creepier, and she was getting old, and we're like, was it, is it dementia? Is her brain starting to go, or is this the mimic thing again? Like, what's happening? So there was just a bunch of stories that would happen like that, where, I can only say it so many times, like people that should have been hundreds of miles away, whether it was me or my sister. People that no longer lived in that house were being seen in the house, and we had access to it. We had keys and stuff. So like sometimes my mom and dad would just think we were coming over to visit or something, then realize a phone call later that, oh, hey, yeah, nope, I'm in a different city, in a different state.
So something about like your grandma getting older, and it's almost like when kids see the spirit world, or like when kids say that they see something, it's like, is the kids' imagination just like going, or is it really, are they telling the truth? Because again, like little kids, sometimes they just don't know how to explain things. They're trying to verbalize and they're trying to say stuff the best that they can. Again, kids have imaginary friends, so is this just something that they're thinking about? But I almost feel like it's on both ends of the spectrum. Kids have this thing where they can tap into this other world or like this other realm and everything like that, and then vice versa, where it's like as you get older, are these older people really seeing something, or is it just like thinking that they're seeing another person, or is it just like their brain just not firing or just being as sharp as it once was? It's really hard to like say what is true, what isn't. I just don't know how or why someone, I guess, doesn't believe. The possibility of it being true is, I feel like it is a strong possibility, just because like the universe and the world is just, it's so enormous. There's a lot of things that you can't understand. And it kind of circling back, you heard the garage door, you heard your mom, you heard bags, what you heard. And then when I asked you, what do you think it was? You're just like, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I feel like there's a strong possibility there is that realm and there is that world, and certain people and certain times, like people can just tap into it. It just will always fascinate and amaze me, and it's just something that I wish we could understand more.
Yeah, and when you're on those two polar ends of life, like getting older or when you're younger, is the veil thinner?
Yeah.
That's what you're kind of getting at. And that leads me into one of the most practical ideas I have about the possibility of paranormal events.
Ooh, okay.
And maybe I can expand on this into an entire episode. And there's actually a famous case that kind of goes along with this as well that maybe I'll save for that. I do think, to a degree, one of the most possible explanations is a multiverse or a multi-world theory, which is, you know how they say in simplistic terms, like every decision we make splits off a different timeline? And then they like to say things like, oh, when you have deja vu, that's kind of like they kind of joke, oh, that means you just died in one timeline and jumped to this one.
I don't think I've ever heard of that theory, but
people say like, oh, when you have stuff like deja vu, that means you just kick the bucket in one timeline and your consciousness jumps to the closest version of you or whatever. And so you just kind of had a glitch there where you're like, oh, okay, and now I'm here. I had a friend who used to say that to all the time, and it used to mess with him. But yeah, if you can imagine all of these universes as like bubbles touching, and sometimes they're touching so close and they're so thin that they cross, or maybe we're just up against each other in certain spaces, because we know that electrons can be in two places at once. And I can use this actually for a remote viewing episode too, which I might use in the future. One of the possible explanations for remote viewing or astral projection. We know that electrons can be in two places in the universe at once. Is it possible that these multiverses are touching so closely that we are not necessarily seeing a ghost from times past, but maybe seeing a time that is present for them, but not for us, crossing paths? Like this veil has been so thin that we're just seeing it in a different period. So think of it this way. If we see a ghost from the 1800s, you see a Civil War soldier or whatever, maybe it is the Civil War. Maybe it's 1864 to this guy, but it's 2025 to you. So if he were to communicate with you, he thinks you're a stranger from the future or an alien, possibly because you're so different. But to us, we think it's just a long dead ghost. But to him, he's alive in the present.
It's not a bad theory, and it's not a bad thought process. My only gripe with that one, and I think I could get on board with it a little bit more if like the UFOs and aliens or creatures if we saw them the same way that we saw ghosts from the past. Because it's always like a translucent figure, or it's just like an outline or a hand. Like you can't really see it. It's like it's just like a part of it, but it's kind of, you can see through it, translucent. Or I've never heard of someone seeing someone that looks futuristic, or an alien creature, but it was transparent. I think if there was more claims like that, I think I could get on board with what you're saying. And it's very possible that that might be the case. Is a very interesting thought process, and I'm not discrediting it or anything like that. I feel like that's my only hang up, was like, if there was people from the future, or if there was figures that like, it looked like they were wearing a spacesuit, or they like had a cell phone in their hand, but it didn't look like a cell phone or something like that, I think I could get on board with it.
Fair enough. I mean, like I said, we could probably do a whole topic on the potential of, multi-worlds theory.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we could. You don't, just you bringing all of this up, I'm just thinking about my past and trying to think of if there was anything like what you were saying that has happened to me. There is one specific time in my life that I can remember something that is unexplainable. But before I get into that, I know you're telling your story. Is there anything else that you have to say about your story?
I guess the best way to like end it is to say this was all just kept between me and my family members. Really, like I said, it wasn't anything we thought of as being so crazy or worth talking about that it was ever brought up in conversation until I started doing podcasts like this. And then it was like, oh yeah, that's probably something I should bring up and see what other people have perspective on. And I told this story years ago on a podcast, and my cousin listened to it, and she would visit, intermittently and everything. She actually started telling her own experiences from when she would visit that house and similar things happening to her.
That was actually going to be my next question, is like, if you had any friends or anybody else over, did they ever see anything or hear anything?
See, there's more I need to ask some of my like older friends that were around during that time, that spent a lot of time at that house, and see if anything weird happened. And I'd like to kind of get some feedback from them. But yeah, it was never anything that was brought up, because like I said, we just kind of accepted it for what it was and didn't have an explanation for it. So we never really made a big deal about it. And then after we all came out and talked about it, then I thought it was worth actually bringing up on a podcast or telling the story. And that's when I started getting other people, like my cousin, being like, well, yeah, that. And she specifically said that back room always gave her that same creepy feeling. And she's significantly older than me, so she was already in high school. Like when I was young, she had a different perspective. She already had a more adolescent experience when I was like a child of this same room, and she got that same feeling. So I always thought that was kind of fascinating.
That really is crazy. Now, because you'd mentioned that back room and how I was like uneasy, I had an uneasy feeling. Did you ever see or hear anything that like in that area of the house? Because I feel like what you had mentioned all kind of happened upstairs away from that area.
Never anything in particular, but it always felt like that's the origin point. Like
Okay.
it always felt like if it had a place it called home, it was always back there.
Interesting.
That was just like the heaviest place in the house. Like, so you always just felt kind of smothered back there for some reason. You always kind of looked over your shoulder. You always felt like you were being kind of watched. Like I said, during the day when I would sit at the couch being playing Nintendo and things like that back there, you always felt like someone was sneaking up behind you. And that's the best way to describe it. It could be broad daylight, and you always just kind of wanted to look over your shoulder and feel like somebody was about to jump and give you like a jump scare. You were just always on edge.
You're making me like look over my shoulder right now. Like the way that you're talking, I find myself peeking over my shoulder, making sure that no one's there. Now, again, I can only think of like one time in my life where something kind of on the lines of like what you're talking about, not nearly as like, I'm not gonna say as bad, but nothing to the extent of yours. And honestly, like, I don't think I've ever told anybody this. Maybe like one person I've told this to before, but it was like right after I had graduated from college. First job, I moved into a townhouse. It was not by any means like an older place. It looked like within the last 10, 15 years, it looked like this townhouse community had been built up, right? There were 3 times living here where things happened and I could not explain it. The first one, this probably could be explained as maybe like a function of the house or something like that, but I remember that I was taking a shower and it was a warm shower and it got cold all of a sudden. You know, pipes, just how pipes work, if someone else is using the water or if a toilet flushes, you know, yada yada, the temperature in the water can change. But when I looked over my shoulder, I had seen that the nozzle thing had turned, and it wasn't like a circle one or anything like that. It was one that where you could clearly see where the position of like the warm and the cold water were. It had changed. It was from the hot now to like the middle, a little bit colder. And I feel like it was, if I remember correctly, it was not something where the handle could have like, you know, swung in the other direction to cold. And I can't explain it. Did I bump into it? Maybe, but I do feel like I would have known, or I would have felt myself bumping into it. And again, all of these things that happened, I was at this townhouse by myself. So that was the first time that something kind of weird happened that I could not explain. The second time was, I remember I had bought a squash, and it was not like a circle or like oval shaped. It was like one of those oblong looking squashes, right? I had put it on the counter that night. And when I woke up in the morning, it was perfectly set on like the bar stool seat. And I can't explain that. Again, I had 2 cats, but the way that it was sitting, it was perfect. These cats, by no means were they ever getting into food or like anything on the table or anything like that. And it was just so odd that it was set perfectly on that bar stool. That one really rattled me. That like I could not explain that one. And then the last time something had happened was I was in the garage and I had the garage door open maybe a foot. I had seen a shadow go from one end all the way to the other. And I lived at like the end of the townhome. There should have been like nobody walking around that area. It was the middle of the day, so like maybe that one could have been like possibly a bird, or like maybe something in the sky had passed over. But it really did look like someone had walked by. It was just like the shadow was too dark and too close to the ground to make it something in the sky. That's how I feel. But that one maybe could have been something else. The shower thing could have been, you know, myself, or maybe just one of the pipes. Maybe, again, my memory from all the way back then is kind of, you know, fuzzy. It's not as sharp, but I do specifically remember that squash, and that really, really confused me. And again, I never felt like being there alone. I never felt uneasy or like something sinister is here, kind of like what you were saying at your house. It was so weird, those things that had happened. And yeah, like I said, I don't think I've ever really talked about that, but you saying your story kind of jogged my memory with that.
Sometimes a story being so plain and boring makes it creepier in that it is more unexplainable, if that makes sense. Like, sometimes sounds like the bigger the story, the crazier, more believable someone might think it is. And to me, the fact that whole mimic thing happened to me, it's not just because it's a personal experience, but to me, I'm like, that's more believable than, you know, a bunch of the stuff I hear, because interacting with like a transparent entity or something like that is crazy. Like if that happened to me, I would probably just be like, yeah, I'm gonna go see a doctor tomorrow. Like get a CAT scan or something. Like something's wrong physically with me. But the fact that all that stuff happened around our house to me and my family and all that stuff, it to me almost pushes me to giving the supernatural more credence. I'm like, well, maybe there is something spiritual out there, because it's so unexplainable in how boring it is, if that makes sense.
That is true. I feel like that gives it a little bit more credibility, especially like when you talk about it, because it's not something like grand or like, it's not something that is like over the top, where like, some videos and sometimes when you talk to people and it's like, oh, the sheets flew through the wall, and or like my shoes flew across the room and glasses would shatter. It's like, okay, did that really happen? Sometimes it's almost like the subtle things are almost a little bit more believable. And then the fact that, like you were saying, multiple family members were all experiencing this exact same thing, I think that just gives it another layer of credibility.
The fact that it was so mundane that none of us brought it up to each other.
Yes.
Not for
Yeah.
not for the sake of thinking we were crazy, but just for the sake of, like, if it happened to me and it didn't happen to anyone else, then I probably would be like, just my mind playing tricks on me.
Yep.
And that would be the end of it.
Thank you for bringing that up. I know you had mentioned this a handful of times, that you wanted to tell your story and everything. And I know Haunted, he's probably listening to this right now as he's editing it, that he probably wishes he was here so he could tell his ghost stories, because I know he has some stories too. Thanks a lot for bringing this up and taking the time and sharing it, because I'm sure other people out here in the audience members, you, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you can resonate a lot with some of the things that we had talked about, like the downstairs. Like I had said that I grew up feeling kind of like the same way, but kind of like what Clark was saying, he feels like that was like the origin point, if something really was happening, that maybe was there. So, but yeah, thanks a lot for bringing this up.
Yeah, I hope it gets everybody in the mood for Halloween.
Oh, I'm sure it will. And yeah, is there anything else, any other stories, any other parts that you feel like you might have missed out on, or anything like that before we sign off?
I think that's generally all the highlights of it. Yeah, that's pretty much covers that one. I've got some other fun stories from giving tours back in the day, and being in other creepy places, I can tell. But this one, I think, is the most personal. It's the most detailed, and like I said, the fact that it happened to family members who I don't talk about a lot of. We don't really share a lot of like personal or beliefs in supernatural stuff or things like that with each other. So the fact that this is something we all share is kind of makes it a little more special too.
Yeah, 100%. And you, as the audience member, if you resonated with any of this stuff, if you have ghost stories, if you want to come on and tell your side of this stuff, by all means, feel free to message us. You can hit us up on Discord. If you're trying to go through Discord, just understand that there is an approval process. I don't know, I'm trying to fix that, but you can reach us through Discord through our Podbean. So if you go to Podbean and you're listening through there are all the links to all our other social medias right at the top, so you can access it there if you want to message us. If not, we also have our email where you can email us. You can message us on our social medias at anytime. We'll take a look at that. And I don't think there's anything else. Clark, do you have anything for the audience members before we sign off too?
No reminders that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, just look forward to more episodes. Stay tuned for all of October, because I think we're going to try to squeeze some live watches in.
Yes, that's actually, thank you for bringing that up. Hopefully this one hits early enough. We'll try to get this out probably in the next week, so everyone in the audience, you can kind of prep for this. But we were having a talk about doing a live episode watching, I think it's Night of the Living Dead. The reason why we're picking that one, again, because it's free. You can watch it with the audio and everything. So if you'd like to sit down and watch that movie with us, we're going to be streaming it. It'll be through YouTube, I think Facebook as well. So if you want to stop by and watch that, we're planning for Halloween. So just kind of take that into consideration. Time still to be determined. We're not going to try to make it too late, but I do know it's Halloween. Other people have things going on, so we'll narrow out a timeline for that. I think that's everything we have. So just remember, we don't want stuff that's normal. We want stuff that's effing weird.